And we want to start our program with the breaking news for this hour. The United States is withdrawing from UNESCO, the United Nations Cultural and Educational Agency, effective December the 31st. The U.S. State Department said that in a statement on Thursday. It said, quote, "This decision was not taken lightly, and U.S. reflected that decision with concerns of mounting areas at UNESCO. The need for fundamental reform in the organization," the statement said, "and continuing anti-Israel bias at UNESCO." That was all the words coming from the statement of the U.S. State Department, adding that the United States would seek to remain engaged as a non-member observer state in order to contribute U.S. views, perspectives, and expertise, end of quote. To ask more about that, and also the reactions coming from UNESCO, we are joined here by two guests. First of all, Rick Dunham, who is here as the co-director of Global Business Journalism Program at Tsinghua University, a Washingtonian for 2 decades as a correspondent in Washington. It's a great pleasure to have you. Also, Professor Liu Baocheng, Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics from the University of International Business and Economics here in China. Want to start with you.
Yep.
UNESCO, in fact, already responded at this point. If I could read to you just some words coming from UNESCO. Bokova is the UNESCO Director General, and she said that is going to be a loss for the UN family and also for multilateralism in the world. She, of course, is responding to the decision from the U.S. talking about so-called withdrawal from UNESCO. Rick, what is happening?
Well, I think you have to look at it 2 ways. One is, as the statement of the Director General just said, it's part of the U.S. retreating from its role in the world, and the Trump administration following its America First foreign policy. The other side is Donald Trump is doing what he said he'd do in the campaign. He was very, very critical of the United Nations all through. He's been very critical of UNESCO. He's simply keeping a campaign promise. He says that UNESCO is anti-Israel. The United States had stopped funding it about 5 years ago. And again, he's following through. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but that's what he's doing.
All right. The United States stopped funding UNESCO from the year 2011 until now, $550 million U.S. dollars. The U.S. owed UNESCO before the U.S. made the so-called decision to withdraw from UNESCO. What about that part of the money?
Well, Trump probably won't pay it. I mean, the United States owes the money to the United Nations, but Donald Trump has said the United States pays too high a percentage of the freight at the United Nations, and other countries such as China should pick up more of the burden. So I think that it will have symbolic value for Donald Trump. I don't think that the United Nations should count on Trump making payments. I mean, he has filed for bankruptcy 4 times in a business, so he doesn't mind not paying debts.
But you're saying it is Donald Trump and the White House, and yet this statement is coming from the State Department rather than from the White House, the Trump administration, the very #1 of it.
Right.
So how should we interpret this? We all understand there seems to be some differences of opinion, at least, between the State Department and the White House. And the State Department has been, over the past few years, during the Trump administration, arguing for multilateralism.
I agree, but the State Department formally speaks for the United States on foreign policy, so that's where it should come from in terms of diplomatic niceties. But you are correct. The Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Donald Trump have been having very public arguments over the past several weeks.
Professor Liu, you've been attentively listening to your American colleague, Rick. As someone coming from China, of course, China is a member of the United Nations, is a member of the P5, as they say, the Permanent 5 of the Security Council. How do you, as someone coming from China, reacting to this?
Well, being an important member in the global stage, the withdrawal is really a shock to the world because, the U.S. has been presenting an image of big and powerful and a global leader, since the Second World War, and right now the sudden withdrawal, despite of the interruption, but now the decisive withdrawal is really something that can surprise the world, and it also indicates the Donald Trump's the consistent message of American first and American immediate first, and he's there simply just to shove off responsibility and strike a deal that is immediately beneficial to the United States.
And we are going to ask a very important question, that is, this is one action taken by the Trump administration to indicate its attitude in the name of Israel.
Yeah.
But the most important question is this only the very first of this domino effect that we're likely to see in American politics and probably in the very near future about its withdrawal from international mechanism, whether it's United Nations or trade mechanisms or regional mechanism, because later today we're going to talk about NAFTA as well.
Right.
Is this going to be the beginning of this United States decline on the international stage?
I think it's the middle of it. I think the beginning was day one of the Trump presidency with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And he's checking down the list of all the things he can do unilaterally as president. And yes, I think we're going to see more retreat from the world, more retreat from the United Nations, more retreat from multilateral organizations.
And also the rejection of the participation in the Paris Accord for climate change. So this is the whole row of changes that are taking place for the American withdrawal from global responsibility.
That is going to take effect, according to the statement coming from the State Department of the United States, December the 31st, at the end of this year. Of course, the world will react to this piece of news in the hours to go. But for now, we want to thank both of you for being with us for this short discussion. And I'm sure World Insight with Tian Wei and the rest of CGTN will focus on the news and also the effect of this piece of news in our other programs.